I want to talk about another
I'm so excited, yes, go ahead.
another Islamic concept of the algorithm. Can you talk to us about algorithms and computing and your kind of thinking through both kind of this deeper history of computing and also kind of where we are today in face of the algorithm?
Yeah, so as context, I grew up in the Bay Area, in what is now considered Silicon Valley, and Facebook/Meta is like 10 minutes from my parents' house. And because I was like an early 90s kid in that area, you ended up testing a lot of stuff. You didn't realize you were testing a bunch of stuff, but we were like, what? Random computers at school, you would figure stuff out. And so I spent a lot of time from like age maybe 8 upwards on computers playing with systems, trying to figure out how things worked. And one of the pieces of software that I loved the most was something called HyperStudio. It was basically like the early internet where you could build your own tiny internet in the context of a couple of these things called cards. You make a card, it would have some information, you would make a button, and that button would send you to another card. You would just build this sort of hypertext through all these cards. And I think that was the first time that I sort of thought about like knowledge as something that can sort of like move or transport to another place and be shared more widely. But it also got me thinking about sort of questions of an algorithm that limits your scope of like what is accessible or what is visible or what is known. And so that sort of more advanced thinking doesn't come until much later. But I think now in my adulthood, spending time coding and doing all these things as a kid, now in my adulthood, I'm really curious about like the algorithm as like a poetics that enters all contexts, like the algorithm of like the classroom also implies that there's a certain expectation on how things are supposed to go, and the breaking of the algorithm can lead to reward or to punishment, but I like to think about the algorithm as a constraint that can be generative, but also a constraint that is possibly invisible or not clearly perceptible in ways that we keep repeating the same sort of pedagogical tropes, we keep repeating the same sort of like political ideas because we're stuck in the loop of a particular algorithm.
So, thinking about this being stuck in algorithm, I mean, as a university professor, my interaction with algorithms are both seen and unseen, right? So some of the more apparent, more visible interactions are, with ChatGPT, right? And with kind of automatic writing, right? But there are also these unseen algorithms, right? Which is kind of what I'm hearing you say about these repetitions that we're compelled to be repeating, that show up in the way my students sit in the classroom, right? The way in which they are often, to me, seem very disempowered, right? In their learning process, right? In a certain sense that there is no other alternative, right? And that's a less obvious algorithm. And I've come to understand the apparent algorithm that a lot of us instructors are kind of sort of freaked out by are only possible because of the unseen ones.
Yes. The
right?
unseen making the,
You know, and I'm just curious kind of as an artist who's engaged with technology, some of your work is kind of in computing, how do you kind of view the most recent developments of like artificial intelligence in particular, and what's your sense of it, and how do you want to engage or not engage?
Yeah, so in 2020, I was invited to do this class at a place called the School for Poetic Computation, which I thought was funny because I hadn't done any like computing for quite some time. But it sort of opened up a lot of interest for me around like chance and sort of predictability. And so in 2022, I have this fellowship with Google, which was like artists and machine learning, where I was sort of playing with text image generation. That's literally typing in a scene or a sentence or whatever the case may be, and then seeing what this trained neural network can produce from that. And this is 2022, so this is early. This is before all the like crisp images we see now was like, it was rough. It was rough. It was a fun time though, I think. And I think that for me, when it comes to machine learning, there are two parts that feel important. I think thinking about the purpose of why you're using something. At the time, I was using it to sort of jam the system to figure out to what extent can it handle poetic language. And what I found out is that as much as it's been sort of positioned as like very intelligent thing, it's a very specific type of intelligence, right? So giving, at 2022, giving this Midjourney a sentence that is very poetic where things are not concrete and materialized, and seeing what it does, like it actually got confused. Like it was sort of like, do I put an orange on top of the, like what happens? And I actually enjoyed that part as sort of a reminder of the importance of like human and non-human intelligence that is not connected to a computer. I think the other thing that feels important to me about machine learning is that part of stuff like ChatGPT and all these things is, I think it robs us, of this thing I spoke about before, which is generative struggle. If I can go to ChatGPT and say, what is the connection between these three ideas, I don't have to actually tussle with the ideas in a way that I would have stumbled upon something else in the process. And so I think my main concern around machine learning is that it does this thing where it speeds through all these major cognitive steps where you like come to an idea, you abandon an idea, you come back to an idea, you're excited, you're sad, you dream about the idea. It erases that entire sort of like workflow for efficiency, and we understand why these systems are important because they make us being workers more efficient, right? And so the trade-off for efficiency in these sort of compressed contexts is that we have, we don't have surprise anymore. I think that's the thing for me is like the sense of surprise is taken from you because you have sort of given it away over to something that can do it more quickly for you. And so I think that like there are elements of machine learning that have been really helpful in my life in terms of being able to like automate things that I need for accommodations and things like that. But when it comes to creative practice, I think it's really important to struggle to arrive at a really, really bad idea on your own and to publicly talk about a really, really bad idea and then to come back like, that was a really, really bad idea. Like all of that sort of public revision is important and it gets edited out when we're trying to get to the answer, the easiest solution as soon as possible.
So I just realized it was a little bit later than I thought.
Oh crap, oh wow.